On the next page, we have some legs. The leg points. There are lots of points on the legs that relate to fertility. All of these will show at some point in some of the recipes, but some of these tend to be more commonly involved. For example, the point here, liver 8. Liver 8 is halfway, if you have the kneecap, right, halfway up on the kneecap, and to the side of the knee is liver 14. Can you find that? From the kneecap, halfway across, here's the kneecap here, all right, so halfway across, so we're in there. Just up a little bit, yeah, that's it. All right, that's your liver 8 point. Liver 8 is a specific point that stimulates liver function. It's an organ point for the liver. And you can do that on both sides. Great, good. You have a lot of spleen points on the that are related to becoming fertile. Spleen has a marvellous ability to regulate blood and blood chemistry. So if the blood is not able to support carrying the hormones or the nutrition properly, these spleen points can rebalance that very, very well. There's another point above here, spleen 10, that you'll see in other workshops, but we really, for most cases, want the spleen 9, spleen 8, really important, and spleen 6. 6 and 8 are probably more commonly used with fertility or reproductive organ problems. So we'll see where these are in Stephania. If we go first to spleen 9, just step forward with this one. So Stephania's kneecap is here. All right. So if we go across to here is liver 8. If we come to the bottom of the knee where we feel it bend in, right in the groove in that place is where spleen 9 is. Right? So you'll feel the knee will come at a bit of a bulge, and then it'll come into the straight bones of the leg. It's in that join, in that dip, is where spleen 9 is. And it can be extremely painful. This is one of the really most painful points that appears on your body. But it'll also disappear very fast. The pain is, not the point. The pain can go away very quickly. All right. So that's on a meridian. So if we go down 3 fingers from there, all right, we're here, we go down 3 fingers from here, we're still on the edge of the bone. That's the next point, spleen 8. Then we go down 3 fingers, or actually 4 fingers up from the ankle on the inside, we have spleen 6. Good. Spleen 6 is a huge point. It monitors all of your blood chemistry. It has connections to lots of the organs that influence the blood chemistry. It also has a lot of connections to the endocrine system. So it can actually use hormones to do some of its balancing, right? Which is amazing. So spleen 6 can be related to not only problems in the blood that are stopping fertility, but it could also even have a hormonal balancing effect as well. The spleen 6 reminds the brain to pay attention to the blood chemistry and therefore the biochemistry that produces the blood chemistry. The blood is the largest organ in your body, and all of the other organs work to support the blood. That's all of their job, does that, is to support the blood. The life quality is in the blood. In other words, if you have good quality blood, you strive for and achieve a good quality in your living. If you have, or if you're in a circumstance where your quality of life is not what you wanted, then you need to get onto spleen 6 and help the chemistry to change so you can reflect that change in your outer world and get the quality of living that you want to have. All right? Spleen 6 is a very important point. And so if a woman is trying to become pregnant, but she's in an environment that she doesn't really like, spleen 6 is a really good point for her to keep rubbing and use as homework. She'll probably actually want to move. If she's in a house she doesn't like, she's probably not going to get pregnant there. If she does, she'll hate the whole process. So spleen 6 will actually help anybody to change the quality of their living. Very nice point to know about. So down from there we have a few kidney points that are necessary for fluid balance and for maintaining the processes of the pregnancy, and especially the fertility. If a woman is dehydrated, she's not going to become fertile as easily as if she was hydrated. So all of these points relate to kidney and hydration. Kidney 8, kidney 7 and kidney 3. Kidney 8 is a point that helps to detoxify the kidney. Kidney 7 is part of the tonification process to bring energy into the kidney. And kidney 3 is how the kidney relates to other certain qualities in the person. So in this case, they're on the outside of the foot. So we use this leg. Step forward, the outside of the foot. Sorry, this is... No, this is on the inside of the foot. Kidneys are on the inside of the foot. Ooh, just hold that up there. Hold that there.
Do you want me to take off?
Good, no. So if we put our hand like this, there's 4 fingers, right? We've got the same position as spleen 6, right? A little bit over, you have kidney 7. Right? Rubbing this point, right, is the tonification point, and a little bit further over is the kidney detoxification, so you've got 8 and 7. If you go down into the middle area under the ankle, right, in here, kidney 3. Right. Right. So if you're not sure, you can just rub the whole area and you'll get spleen 6 and kidney 8 and kidney 7. Woohoo! What a good combination. And then you add kidney 3 to that, and you're adding a lot of really good qualities to the reproductive organs that allow the person to become fertile. Okay? It's actually on the inside of the leg. Liver is on the inside, spleen, kidney on the inside of the leg, not the outside. If we look at here, we've got the position for spleen 9 again, and almost directly opposite that, on the outside of the leg, is stomach 36. Stomach 36 is a really important point for all of the energy balance from the feet all the way to the top of your head. Stomach meridian runs from just below the eyes all the way down your body to your toes. So stomach 36 is almost like the energy pivot point for all of that energy. It feeds energy into the head, particularly into the eyes. It regulates digestion. Then it also regulates how you use that energy from digestion physically, like moving, running, walking. On the way through, it's connected, remember stomach 30 and stomach 29, it's connected to the reproductive system. Right, so those 2 points can actually bring the energy to the reproductive system, but if stomach 36 is out of balance, then that's not going to happen. Just step forward with this one. All right. So we just go down 3 fingers from the bottom of the kneecap on the outside, rub in there. And quite often this is sore, particularly if the person is not eating the right foods to be able to function properly. So if that's sore on a woman, That could be the reason why she can't become fertile. Could be. There might be other points as well, but if that's sore, it has to be stimulated. Mandatory. Up from the knee on the inside, you can see about the same distance down from spleen 9 to the same distance up from the top of the kneecap is spleen 10. Again, this is also another really important point for organising the function of the energy that goes into the reproductive system. All right, so what I've done is I've got the kneecap. Yeah, I've got the kneecap here. 9 is in the little dip here. You go the same distance from the top of the kneecap and you find spleen 10. Rubbing that point, and on the other side as well. And if you're not sure, just rub the whole area. And you'll soon become that too. You'll soon become sure because the point will get sore. And you go, oh, that's it. Oh, I found it. Oh, gosh. And sometimes, when you're working with somebody else, you go, is this sore? Boink. Ah! No. Because they know you're going to rub it anyway, so they pretend that it's okay. Rubbing that point will have a lot of beneficial effect on the blood supply for the reproductive organs. So there's 10, 9 we know, stomach 36. Now if we go exactly halfway between the kneecap and the ankle, we have stomach 40. This is a point it's sort of related to how well the nutrition that you get from the digestive process is actually utilised. It's a nutrition utilisation point. It's very, very important that there's enough nutrition coming into the reproductive organs for the woman to become pregnant. So we go to the outside, right? Here we have the base of the kneecap. We have the ankle here, right? So halfway is in here. So stomach 36 was here. We follow it to halfway, and we've got stomach 40. Again, if you're not sure, just rub about the middle of the leg. Right? Ankle, right? But on the outside. We're not rubbing on the bone or on the front, we're rubbing behind the bone, slightly on the side. All right? This is the back of the knee here. So we have bladder 40 and we have gallbladder 34. The gallbladder point, if you go down the outside of the leg there's a little dip just below the knee. All right, that little dip is where the gallbladder point is. The bladder point, if you go to the middle of the back of the knee and just one finger width across from the middle, that's where the bladder point is. So you can just rub those 2 points to get the back of the knee points done. Okay, turning over then, you can turn around. We have some hands and foot points. Now you'll also notice that on this illustration, you have some green circle spots. The green circle spots are a set of points that I'll be talking about a bit later on, and these are the points that you would do first because they're very important for deep acting energy responses, and as a consequence you want to do this, and sometimes you do this before any of the other recipes. It means that the other recipes can work more efficiently if these points are stimulated first. So we'll have a look at where they are. On the hands, right, we have lung 7. Now, if Stephania puts two fingers, right, on these, puts 2 fingers from touching the base of the thumb, right, the base of the thumb, that point is, anybody know what that is? No? Okay. Lung 9. Then the next finger down is lung 8. So another finger down is, yes, lung 7. All right? So lung 7 is a very important point in balancing how we get the energy from our breath into the rest of our body. Lung 7 for what they call air chi or vitality chi in some books. It's where we get our vitality from, lung 7. Small intestine 3 is on the outside of the hand. You have small intestine 1, 2, 3 is on the inside of the knuckle, on the outside of the hand. All right, so it's at the base of the little finger, but on the other side of the knuckle, the hand side of the knuckle. So rubbing that point does a whole lot of things with the small intestine's connection to the reproductive system and other systems as well. Very important point. But again, it's also connected to some of the very deep energies in the meridian system and needs to be done first to bring that energy to the surface. Okay. Now the other two green points are on the feet. All right. So if we go down to your right foot, yep, just lift it up. Okay, good. Now we have the gallbladder meridian that runs from the second last toe and it comes up and goes up into the body. But where it comes onto the side of the foot, you can feel there's a little bit of a hollow just here. It's a bit further than halfway. And you feel in there and you find a little hollow. That's gallbladder 41. It's a regulation point for the energy for the gallbladder meridian, but it's also a master detoxification point too. It also helps the gallbladder meridian to connect to other types of energy in your body. So it's a very, very important connecting point. The other point is spleen 4, which is on the inside of the foot. Stand on that. Stand on that. Good. So the spleen meridian runs up the side here. All right. You've got 1, 2, 3, and 4 is just here in that little hollow, just past the halfway mark on the foot. The spleen 4 is in there, so you can give that a rub, and that gives access to the meridians that specifically support the reproductive organs. Now, if that one's sore, quite often it means that maybe the person was pregnant and can't hold the pregnancies. So if a person has continued miscarriages, often spleen 4 is involved and it'll be sore. So they need to rub it. Good. So while we're on the foot, let's go and check out some other points. So we've got spleen 4 down here. Then we come up on the inside here up to spleen 6, which is just a little bit higher. It's on the upper angle of the ankle. That's kidney 3 was here, right? And kidney 6 is just a little bit higher because the kidney meridian comes up and does a bit of a wiggle before it goes back up. So 6 is down here. Here's the turn of the ankle, right? Just inside the turn of the ankle on the top side. It's kidney 6. On the front, stand on the mat. Good. We have on the other side of the big toe, we've got liver 1. Then coming back down into where the big toe connects to the foot is liver 2. Right? Liver 2 is also a really important point for how the liver connects to the reproductive organs, and particularly how it regulates some of the biochemistry. And then liver 3, you continue up and you can feel where the two tendons come together. That's liver 3. And liver 3 has a lot to do with the circulation effect of the liver with the circulation of the reproductive organs. So we had gallbladder 41 over here. If we continue up to the base of the ankle and go straight down halfway between the foot and the ankle, we have bladder 62. Bladder 62 is another point that relates to very deep activity in the meridian system, but it's also a point that can help to regulate the, what's the best way of describing it? It helps to regulate how the perceptual processes can connect to fertility. If a person's self-image doesn't see them being pregnant, it's going to be really hard for them to become pregnant. Bladder 62 will help them to change their self-image enough for them to be able to see themselves as being a mum and be able to become pregnant. Okay. Does that cover all the points on the feet? Bladder 66 is on the bladder meridian further down. The end of the bladder meridian is on the outside next to the little toe. That's 67. 66 is at the base of the next joint back. Right? On the front side of that joint. 65 is on the other side. 66 is about the middle of the little toe. Good. All right, we've got some interesting points on the arms. So on the arm you have the large intestine, and how do you do lung points? You've got lung 7 here, which we've already covered. On the back side, between the thumb and the index finger, where they come together, right, is Haegu, which is large intestine 4. This is a point you would not use during pregnancy. You don't use this one during pregnancy. Now, for those of you who know muscle monitoring, right, you can use this if it shows up as relevant via muscle monitoring, but because most of the people who are doing this don't know what muscle monitoring is yet, then stimulating this point is not a good idea during pregnancy. But before pregnancy, trying to become pregnant, it's a really good idea because it removes a lot of the built-up toxins in the intestines that influence the nervous system that can be stopping the pregnancy. You know, people accumulate toxic material in their intestines, and that affects the nervous system, and that affects how well they're able to become pregnant or not. So this is a really good one for clearing stuff out of the head, right? For making the head more clean, the brain functioning better, toxins, you know, if they have headaches. One of the things that I've found with even sometimes in pregnant women, if they have headaches, right, you can rub this point just a little bit and the headache goes away. That says they have an intestinal toxicity problem, and they probably need to have some chlorophyll or some herbs that are gently cleaning the intestines. They don't and should not have herbs that are used to clean the intestine by making the intestines contract, because that also makes the uterus contract, and if they have a fertilised egg in there, they can lose it. Right, so any intestinal cleansing stuff should be very carefully operated, very carefully done to avoid that contraction stuff. Now, usually the way to do that is with magnesium, because magnesium is by far the preferred mineral of the large intestine. It runs on magnesium. So when women are having like little contractions or little aches and pains, twinges, that sort of thing, it's usually an indication that they don't have enough magnesium. And in pregnancy, they need like 10 times more magnesium and calcium than they do normally. And it's not an exaggeration. You know, I've seen people who are taking magnesium supplements during their pregnancy, and they're not taking a third of what they really need. Usually most people are deficient in magnesium anyway. Then they get pregnant And now they're massively deficient in magnesium. And we need the calcium to balance the magnesium. Right? So when the large intestine 4 point is sore, right, here, right, it's often related to a magnesium and possibly calcium deficiency. Right? So tell them, go and have some magnesium and calcium. Actually, you can't do that. What you can do is say, if I was you, I would be taking a lot more magnesium. All right? And if they do, that's good. And if they don't, you didn't tell them to in the first place. This next point is numbered small intestine 5. That's not correct. I'll find out what that is and get back to you. But the position is correct. 3 fingers up from the wrist, in the middle of the back of the hand, and it's probably a triple warmer point, but we'll get back to you with that one. Then if you run the large intestine up to the elbow, where the little muscle turns up to the top surface, you push in there, it's large intestine 11. Now it shows on the illustration that it's right next to the crease. It's not actually, it's actually just a little bit down from the crease. You'll find it anyway. If you start pushing around, you say, is that sore? No. Is that sore? Yes! You found the point. Right? And it's usually just a little bit down from the crease. So if you want to rub in there, can you feel it? Yeah. If you can't feel it, move it a bit. Just come out a little bit more. Yeah. It's in there? Good. So, you know, the person and yourself, when you're rubbing these points, you can find them, right? Like, oh, there it is. Okay, that's good. They either feel like they're in a little bit of a hollow or they'll be painful. All right? So we've got large intestine now on the front of the hand. Good. The front of the hand, we have the lung 7 we covered before. We've got circumflex 6, which is the exact opposite position of the triple warmer point, but it's on the front. 3 fingers, and then right next to that is your circumflex 6. Really important for all sorts of motion. This is a motion sickness point. People who get sick travelling in trains, buses, cars, whatever, they can rub this point and it'll control their nausea and that sort of thing. So it helps with morning sickness. The nausea sensations, a big problem with women when they become pregnant. This is not only in the middle, it's right in the middle, not only helps with the nausea, but it also helps with regulating the energy of how the pregnancy fits in with everything else. This is a regulation point for the adrenal pituitary axis. So when women get really stressed, this point gets really sore. All right? And it may be enough to stop them from becoming fertile because there's just too much adrenal activity going on. So you need to rub the point to turn that off. Another point which is a really interesting point is the heart 7. Heart 7 is just below the wrist, but under the little finger. Right? This is what we call an anxiety point. Right? You can rub in there. Now, when a person actually feels anxious, it's better to tap the point first and then rub. But for the balancing of the heart energy with the reproductive stuff, then heart 7 is by far the best point to use. It opens up the whole of the arterial system. Opens up the blood supply to the heart, and it opens up the blood supply to the reproductive organs so that the hormones of the reproductive system and the hormones of the heart can communicate with each other. Right? So when this point is blocked with too much energy and the person is feeling anxious, it's because the reproductive hormones are not talking to the heart hormones, or vice versa. That communication isn't there. Right? So that's a really good point to not only help anxiety, but from a fertility point of view, it helps the person to reset their heart's desire for something. And in this case, it would be their heart's desire to have a baby with the person that they're with. So I think that covers all of the points on the hands and feet. So you can see that, yes, there's a lot of points, but as you get used to these and as you start going through the relevant recipes, you're actually going to find that they're pretty easy to become familiar with. And when you're working with these with other people, you'll find the recipe that suits them, show them the points specifically, and they will know them better than you will. So, usually you don't need to have a lot of recipes, a lot of points for people to help them. And you can photocopy the positions of these things in your manuals and give them to them so they can, get used to the points and know where they are. That's not a problem. Thanks, Estefania. Thanks for volunteering your points for science. Good. Thank you. Okay, so do you have any questions about the points or the placing of the points or... Yep, question. 3 questions. Well, we'll take the first one first.
The in-tank point?
The in-tank point, yes.
The same as the point that we were talking about yesterday, of the pituitary? No, it's under. A little bit under. Is the in-tank point the same as the neurolymphatic reflex for pituitary? Not really. The yin-tank point is actually between the eyebrows, where the reflex point for pituitary is actually just slightly above that. All right? Where the reflex is much larger and the point is much more specific and definitely in the middle. The question is, do we tap points, especially if we don't know what we're doing? No, you'd never tap points if you don't know what you're doing. But, as I said, with Heart 7, if the person is anxious, they're actually experiencing an anxiety attack, tap Heart 7 because it disperses the excess energy, but then rub it so the rest of the meridian system can connect to that in a proper way. Because their own anxiety is enough to stop them from getting the benefit from the rubbing if there's too much energy at the point. Right? So you can tap that, but you wouldn't tap that as the solution. It's just as an initial reduction of energy, and then you have to go and rub. But to just automatically go and tap points as a solution is not really a good solution. It's great for suppressing symptoms, but it's not a solution for the cause of the symptoms. So the question is, does this work, this fertility thing work for people who have had something like, say, chemotherapy? Chemotherapy will make people infertile because it kills just about everything. It will kill most functions off. That's why people lose their hair and their sperm count goes to 0 and lots of things happen. You have to help a person to recuperate from the chemotherapy before you know whether to use this or other things. Because the chemotherapy will definitely make them infertile. Some people say, oh, look, I never had any problems, but in fact, they probably already produce lots and lots of really fertile sperm in the first place, and then when they've had their chemo, that count will go down. But with people who already have low sperm count and they have chemotherapy, that will knock it out to the point where they will become infertile and not be able to recuperate that back for some time. Some people will recuperate and become fertile later on, usually about 12 to 18 months later. But if they did this after recuperating from the chemotherapy, they could become fertile within a couple of weeks. So it does help them in that situation. But there's no point in doing this while they're still taking their chemo, because the chemo is still going to be knocking out and killing off their sperm. Now, the same thing happens with women. All right? It'll kill off the ovum. All right? It kills off ovary function. In fact, the ovaries actually start to shrink under chemotherapy with women.
So again, you have to help the people to recuperate from the effects of the chemotherapy before you do this specifically, because this would be a waste of time. If the ovary isn't functioning because of the chemotherapy, you have to balance that situation first. Then, if the ovum is functioning okay by itself but still not producing ovum, then this would be a good place to go. Mm-hmm. So, if the chemotherapy was done 15 years ago and he's still not fertile, then the chemotherapy has damaged the testes to the degree where he may never become fertile again. But you don't know. Do this and see what happens. If he still wants to have kids 15 years later, he's probably resigned himself to the fact that he doesn't want to have kids by now. Or he may have adopted children or whatever. But
he was very young by the time.
He was very young?
15.
Yeah. So there's still probably a good chance that you could reverse that and get that fertility back again. Yeah. The question is, if you combine this with increased sexual energy workshop, could that make a difference? I'm sure it would. Absolutely. But whether it would be enough to re-establish the function of the testes, I don't know. But it would be worth doing and seeing if it works, you know. Sure.
On the belly side?
If a person has already had a caesarean birth, is there any restrictions or warnings in using the points on the abdomen? The only thing to be aware of there is that the points may not be where you think they are, or should be, because often in operations, particularly in the earlier days when they used to leave massive scarring and stuff, some of these points get destroyed in the process, particularly if they've done a low cut, right? Some of these points will not be functioning properly anyway. So rubbing the points might take longer, but you can actually re-establish the function of the points by rubbing them. It'll take longer to have the effect, but you're actually making the point first and then you're using it to stimulate the fertility of the person. But if they've had a caesarean birth already, then they don't need fertility, do they? Well, they were already pregnant, weren't they? Well, there they go. But that's an interesting point, because this happens where a person will have a baby, have a caesarean birth and then can't get pregnant. You're almost certain it's these points that have been put out of balance because of the surgery. And again, just rubbing the points. Just show them where the points are, get them to rub all the points, and eventually they'll re-establish and they'll become fertile again. Now, if there's a lot of scarring, and particularly with scarring internally that creates adhesions, that's going to have to be balanced specifically using neurotraining techniques to get that sorted out. And that's beyond the scope of this workshop. But that can be done, and then people become fertile and are able to have children again. So if they are infertile because of the effects of the caesarean, they can be reversed. But you probably have to go to extra lengths than just using these points. These points are really specifically for reorganising the energetic ability of the person to become pregnant. All right? Now, where surgery has been used, you have scar tissue that interferes with the flow of that energy. That's the problem, and that has to be reorganised specifically. Yeah. Okay. The question is there a specific point for frustration in the male, I'm assuming partner, while sexual frustration, yeah, while she's pregnant? And after she's pregnant?
No, after the baby's delivered, there's no sex.
Yeah, after, like there's about 2 weeks or so afterwards that they say you can't go near the woman.
Well, sometimes it's 2 years.
Sometimes it's 2 years. Ow! Okay, well, there are points for libido, and that's probably better used for the woman, right? Because if she gets her libido back, then, you know, he doesn't have any frustration anymore because. It balances out naturally. I really hesitate to give answer to this one. There are no specific acupuncture points that I know of. Well, that's not true. There are some specific acupuncture points that will reduce the frustration, but it also reduces your sexual energy. And that's not really the way to deal with it. The way to deal with it is more exercise. It's true, more exercise. You burn off the hormones that are making you horny, and you're not so horny. Now, there's going to be times when you have to make an agreement between yourself and your partner as to the fact that you're frustrated and you need some things just like she needs some things, and help each other out. But the exercise is a really good way of reducing that. The other thing is don't eat meat. Just cut out eating meat, because the meat gives you a high amount of proteins that you will turn into sperm. And the more sperm you have, the more horny you get and the more frustrated you get because you can't share it. So don't eat so much meat. In fact, don't eat any meat. And you'll find that your own desire will be much less. And if you exercise, then you'll actually be using those proteins to build muscle instead of to make sperm. Because men make millions of sperm very quickly. But if you don't have the protein, it slows that process down. And the slower the process, the less intensity there is in the desire for sex.
So what would be the libido point for the woman?
Oh, there's a number of them. We'll go over them, in subsequent workshops. Yeah. But yeah, it is a problem. And if a person has no libido for years after the pregnancy, these points are really great. They can turn things back on that have been turned off for years and years and years. In fact, one woman, she's 65, right? And it was like, what's that? 45 years before she gave birth to her last child, and she hasn't had any libido up to that time, and we did some of these points with her, and she went home and jumped on her husband. Wouldn't let him up until he performed. Oh, she was a character. But she was 65 at the time, so I don't know what he thought about that, but maybe he thought it was Christmas or something. Is it possible to put the anoptic under the clothes? You're talking about the no endo anoptic that we're using in this workshop? Yeah, you can put it under the clothes. You can put it directly over the umbilicus. That's fine. The only exception to that is if you have leather or synthetic clothes, you shouldn't put the anoptic over them. In the leather, it's not going to get through. The synthetic stuff can alter the frequency enough to make it different than what you want. In that case, you put it under the clothes and hold it there. Yeah, sure. Yeah, well, I mean, if you don't have enough hands to do it and you can stick it under the clothes to hold it there, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, no problem. But remember, we'll be actually doing the practice in pairs, so we get the effect done even if you're not, able to do everything yourself. So then you've got 4 hands working on the process, not 2. And it tends to work better. If the question is, can you use polarity to balance the points? If you know how to use polarity and you're using muscle monitoring in the process, yes, you can definitely check for polarization. Because polarization is just that because the acupuncture points actually oscillate when they're in balance, they go backwards and forwards. When they're polarized, either positive or negative, they spin one way or the other. And so the regulation of the energy gets out of balance. So polarizing actually brings the spinning point back into an oscillating process, which is much more regulatory of the energy. So yes, if you know how to do that process, then certainly you can do that with any of these points. Yeah. Now, for those of you who know, if that doesn't balance the points, right, which is sometimes the case, then of course you would make that the focus of the balance for the rest of the session. Balance the points specifically. So the question is, in other workshops I've referred to the functions of the points as excess, deficiency and disrupted. And I mentioned before that you have excess, deficiency and perverse. Perverse and disrupted is the same thing. It's the same thing. The disruption creates a deformed form of energy. And in the Chinese thinking, that's called perverse qi. It's the same thing. Yeah. There's only 3 states an acupuncture point can be in: excess, deficient, or disrupted, which is a perverse qi process. Yeah. Okay, so I want to go through the different groups of recipes that we have. There are 6 groups of recipes. So if you turn to page 18, we'll have a look at the first group of points. This is a mandatory first step. With a lot of these groups, you can use whatever group of points that may relate to your needs. Group 1, though, is a mandatory part of where you need to start. That's because these points in Group 1 relate to what they call the extraordinary meridians. They're not extraordinary in that they have great superpowers or anything. They're extra to the ordinary meridians. So they're not part of what the normal 12 organ-based meridians are. They are part of the meridian system that exists in utero before you take your first breath. After you take your first breath, these meridians play different functions. And so the 4 points that you have in this first group relate to 4 of those extraordinary meridians that can help the process of getting energy into the reproductive cycles so the person can become fertile. Sometimes it's just a matter of practicing these points only, without any of the other groups. These 4 points have made people pregnant. They're very, very strong points. So, let's have a look at them. The Chong vessel. Chong is a strange word, but it actually relates to the hypothalamus. It's a hypothalamus meridian. It actually runs underneath the kidney meridian, so it has a really beautiful relationship with the kidney function, which is the inherited part of the making baby process. But it's the Chong meridian that connects to the hypothalamus that regulates what the kidney does. It decides what part of the inherited patterns are going to be implemented into the making the baby process. But before the person gets pregnant, right, the hypothalamus is responsible for setting up that energetic circumstance that allows the person to actually become pregnant later on. So it's that Chong vessel, that hypothalamus meridian, that actually sets everything up. So it's a really important part of the process. Then you have the governing vessel. Now the governing vessel has a lot to do with the central nervous system, the spine, and all of the nerve controls through the different vertebral levels. So in this case it's small intestine 3. The access to the Chong vessel or the hypothalamus meridian is spleen 4. The Daimei Y, actually, the belt vessel or the belt meridian is that one that goes around the abdomen. This is the one that actually feeds the energy into the uterus. And in the fetal stage, it's this meridian that's actually building the reproductive organs. You can access this meridian with gallbladder 41 and central vessel, which brings in again central nervous system, but now the brain, the perceptual processes and the thinking facilities is all accessed by central. That's lung 7. Now if you rub them in this order, you may or may not feel a response. If you rub them in a different order, you may or may not feel a response. In other words, you rub these in any order until you feel like, oh, gee, I feel better from doing it in that order. All right? Now, I've put it in this order because this seems to be the most beneficial for most people. So if you don't know, then just do it this way. You're still going to get, a very strong and good effect from that. Now, there's a little section there in brackets under the belt meridian. If the person has pelvic inflammation, now they will usually be told this by their doctor or especially their gynecologist, who will say, oh, you've got pelvic inflammation syndrome or something like that. If they come to you and say, oh, look, I've got this pelvic inflammation problem, you can do the gallbladder 41 and add these other points, gallbladder 26 and triple warmer 5. And they work then very, very nicely to take away the inflammation out of the pelvic area. While women have the pelvic inflammation, and it could be for lots of different reasons, but while that inflammation is there, their response to the inflammation or to the damaged tissues is going to stop them from becoming pregnant. So, that's an important part of preparing the environment, and not only energetically but also physiologically, for fertility to take place. Now, if you're not sure, you can push around in your abdominal areas, and if you have any sore spots in more than half of the areas, then you've probably got a pelvic inflammation problem. And just add these extra points into the process. So you just add, so instead of having 4 points, you'd add these extra 2 points, so you'd have 6 points to go through. All right? It doesn't hurt, but really the main job of the first group is the extraordinary meridian involvement, and that's spleen 4, small intestine 3, gallbladder 41, and lung 7. They are the king of the reproductive cycles. You may need to do these, well, it's actually advised to do these before you do any of the other recipes. So if you do these and you do another recipe and then you decide you want to do a second recipe, do these 4 again before you do the second recipe. The reason for that is whatever toxic energy comes off from the meridians after doing the recipe can actually be taken away by the extraordinary meridians very efficiently, because that's part of what their job is to do. So the group 1 is the master point combinations. These are called master points because these are master points for that particular extraordinary meridian. That's what they're called, master points. So you can have fun with your master points, and in fact some people have so much fun with their master points that they get pregnant from it. Oh, good luck for them. The second group relates to a phenomena where, well, we've called the second group the menstrual phases. There are 5 different stages that the menstrual process goes through during a complete month. Now, any one or combination of these phases could be out of balance and therefore stopping either the ovulation or the implantation of the ovum, or at some stage just not allowing the circumstances for a fertility or for a conception to take place. So it's important to at least go through these 5 phases at least once. If you suspect, and particularly with women who have very unpredictable periods, where the menstruation is unpredictable and it's changing and they never know what to expect or when to expect their period, then reorganising these 5 phases of menstruation is really important. And just by doing that could be enough for them to become pregnant. Obviously they have to have a partner, practicing with. So when I say they can become pregnant, they don't get pregnant by just rubbing points. Right? They rub his points and then they share the experience. So you have 5 phases in the menstrual process. The phase 1 is the follicular phase, and I've put there, if I could, what these relate to. And the follicular phase is related to kidney and blood function. Now, if you understand traditional Chinese medicine, that will make sense to you. If you don't, pay no attention to it. It doesn't matter. In phase 1, you have 2 general recipes. And all of these points are what you would do if you had problems in the first phase of your menstrual cycle. Now, of course, men don't tend to have these problems for obvious reasons, unless they have a partner that has these problems, then they've got a problem. Believe me. So it's good for you guys to know this, because sometimes you're in a better position to recognise it than the ladies are. In phase 1, we have 2 general recipes. General recipe A, right, which is kidney 3, spleen 6, Zhigung and CV3. And if the person has hot symptoms of heat, perspiring easily, flushed face, feeling hot, has to go outside in the cool air, that sort of stuff, then you'd add CV4 and kidney 7 to that mix. So that second line is if they have symptoms of heat. All right. Now, the follicular phase, if you haven't worked it out already, these 5 phases are cyclic. So after phase 5 is finished, phase 1 starts. It's true. So when the person has finished the bleeding part of the menstruation, then comes back to the first phase, which is the follicular phase. So if after having finished the bleeding, then they start to get symptoms of heat, flushed face, perspiring easily, sweating at night, then you'd want to go through general points A and add CV4 and kidney 7. That's what the heat there refers to. The general recipe B is just as it is. It's another option. So if you go through A and it doesn't seem to make any difference, then do B. Some people have found if they do both, they get more benefit. Some people have found that the general recipe B by itself was better for them, and others found that A by itself was better. So just experiment with them. See what's best for you. I actually had an interesting experience with a guy who does a lot of sport. And in doing the checking, we found that he had to have the menstrual cycle phase 1 balanced. This is a guy, right? Male type person, testosterone, the whole bit. And he had to be balanced to phase 1 menstrual cycle. And I thought, well, maybe he's surrogating for his girlfriend or something. No, he really needed these points to be balanced. So that was actually the second general. So I just went through these points. I showed him what the points were, so he could rub the points in this order. And he said a few weeks later, it was actually about a month later, he said, "Wow, I don't know what you did, but I've got so much more energy when I'm playing sport. It's amazing." So they can help men too, but I don't understand really how that works. So, give it a go, guys, and see what happens. If the person suffers pain at ovulation, because the follicular phase is actually from the bleeding time up to ovulation. So when women have pain on ovulation, either before or during or just after, you could do the recipe that's underneath the square there. That's spleen 10, large intestine 11, bladder 17, and if they have heat symptoms at the time of the pain, then you'd add liver 2 and liver 3. So you can see then that the format of these phases is you have general ones that you would do just because it's that time of the cycle that you're having problems with. But if you have specific issues like, in this case, pain on ovulation, then you'd want to add these points. Sometimes it's not pain. Sometimes it's just a really heightened sensitivity. All right? And women become very sensitive when they're ovulating to the point that it distracts them from doing other things. Well, then you do the same points. It's the same situation. Phase 2 is the ovulation itself. Now, this relates to liver and blood movement. The general A, liver 3, that's liver 4 is number 62 there. I don't know if you have that In English, you have a 61 in front. You just cross out the 61. That's the wrong number. Should be 62, and then that's liver 4. 48, large intestine 4. But you don't use any of those points during pregnancy. If a person's already pregnant, don't use these 3 points. There's also another one that you shouldn't use during pregnancy, and that's spleen 6. Right, so if you want to put that in brackets somewhere next to the not during pregnancy, spleen 6, you can add that one in as well. In fact, spleen 6 and large intestine 4 are the main points that you should stay away from when a woman is pregnant. Some people who don't want to be pregnant and have found out very early in the process that they are pregnant have actually used these points to create spontaneous miscarriages. I don't recommend that because it doesn't always work, and it has secondary problems attached to it. But there are ways of being able to create that, but we don't go into that side of things. A large intestine 4. Spleen 6 and large intestine 4. When the person has sore breasts on ovulation, then you would add the ear triangle section to the process, to the general and then the ear triangle up the top. And that will tend to give them the energy they need to go through the ovulation without creating congestion in the breasts. Then you have another recipe, general, spleen 8, spleen 10 and bladder 17. They're different points, they work differently to influence different aspects of the ovulation process. So you can have fun with them. The luteal stage is directly after ovulation. This relates to kidney and spleen. You have 3 generals in this. Now the generals here are determined by the symptomology of the person. General A is just that, it's general. If they have any sorts of symptoms directly after having the ovulation, which is usually about the middle of their cycle, then you go through those points, number A. But if afterwards, after they've had the ovulation, they have heat symptoms, then you'd go through general number B. If they have congestion after ovulation, right, they put on fluid, right, they feel heavy, right, they feel tired, then you do general number C. All right. They're quite specific distinctions and they work very well. There are some other possibilities after the ovulation that take place, which is depression after ovulation. Right? In the luteal phase, they get depressed, and you have quite a number of points there to rub for depressive responses. Now, they may not say it's depression. They may just say, I feel a bit moody or a bit sad, right? Or sometimes it's like, oh, things just aren't working well. It doesn't really seem like a full-on depression, like, oh, I'm really depressed. It doesn't have to be like that. But they just don't feel up. They don't feel like they have the energy. So put them through the depression set. If they feel cold afterwards, after the ovulation, they feel chilly, they need lots of clothes, and they're sitting in front of the heater, and it's the middle of the day, the hottest part, they've got all the windows open to get the heat in, then they're a cold person. So kidney 7 and central vessel 4, plus they need to have walnuts and L-arginine, which is the amino acid, arginine. They need to add that into their diet. If they're hot after ovulation, right, where they're ripping all their clothes off and they're having cold showers and eating ice, that's a good indication where after the ovulation the woman will eat ice. Right? It's because she's hot. So take us through liver 2, the ear triangle, yin tang, bladder 42 and heart 7. These are the preferred order of these things, but they may, you may change them to see if a different order works better. If the person after ovulation becomes erratic,
like they're not consistent. They don't know what they're going to do next. And that, I don't know if this happens to you, but I know clients that have had this. Then you do the liver 3, liver 8, and liver 14 points, because that's obviously it's a liver problem. But the erratic thing is quite often a toxicity that's built up after the ovulation has finished, and they can't handle it and they go a bit funny. It's a protein problem. Again, you've got a little notice there, not during pregnancy, large intestine 4 and spleen 6. The fourth phase is a premenstrual formation. Now this is liver. The liver is making more blood in preparation for the flushing out of the lining of the endometrium. So there's only one set of points for that, as listed there in General A. This is where a person knows the period is coming and they feel congested, they feel tight, they feel uncomfortable, and they're often irritable. How's it going, darling? Don't talk to me! Uh-oh, it's time for phase 4 points, dear. So go through liver 2, liver 3, liver 14, spleen 10, and bladder 17. And give them a good hard rubbing. It might save your life. Or hers. Phase 5, this is the actual menstruation itself, the actual bleeding phase. If the bleeding is normal, right, it will take around about 3 to 4 days, possibly longer. If it takes less than 3 days, it's a short period. Some people only have it for a couple of hours. Right? Some people have one spot. That's it. That was their period. That's not good enough. That's called scanty or short. Probably both. Right? Scanty means it's little bits over a period of time, but it's not a consistent flow. Then you have those points, and you want them to add oats to their diet. Oats. It's very good for building the nerves and helps the whole of the reproductive system to rebuild its nerves and the skin and the tissues. It's very good for recuperation. If the menstruation is watery or there's a lot of the menstruation, there's a lot of fluid, it doesn't stop, for example, then really the best way to deal with that is to give them ginseng and astragalus. These are 2 tonic herbs that rebalance the hormones of the reproductive system with the hormones of the pituitary gland. This is really a biochemical change that these people have to go through to get control over the loss of the fluids. Right? Now, it's a kidney problem, but balancing the kidney doesn't really do much. When we have a look at what to do during pregnancy in that other workshop, we'll be looking at water utilisation and water metabolism, which will help to balance the ever-ending or the never-ending periods. If it's brown, then the person needs the herb called angelica. It's very good for cleaning up the whole of the bloodstream. If it's profuse but clotted and painful, then the person needs to have safflower, peach kernels, and frankincense. Usually all 3 is best. It's not always mandatory to have all 3, but certainly the options in there are going to help the person to either reduce the amount of flow and certainly to get rid of the clotting that occurs. If the period is short, they need a herb called peony. It's called peony rose. It's a big, beautiful flower, but it's actually made from the plant. And mutan is another herb. If you don't know where these things are, you can look them up in your local language and find out what they're called, but this is the English name for them. If there's no cycle, right, if they go through all the 5 cycles but there's no bleeding, then you go back and you do phase 1, General A. And you do it every day until they have a cycle. And then they start the phases from that first bleeding. Right, so that's the bleeding is phase 5. So when that's finished, then they're into phase 1.
All right? And they will continue to do phase 1 general until they go through a full 28 days cycle. Because sometimes they have no bleeding, but they've had no bleeding for a long time, so they haven't actually been able to complete a whole cycle. All right? So you might help them to start the period, but then they don't have a period again for 6 weeks. Right? Or they have another one 3 weeks later. Right? So whatever happens, they keep rebalancing the same points, they still stimulate the same points in phase 1, general, A, until they have gone through a full 28-day cycle. And then it should be right. You shouldn't have any problems with that anymore. So they're the 5 phases of the menstrual group. And any one of those could be responsible for not being able to become pregnant. Any one of them. So the points that are given there, you'll see some of the points overlap from one group to another because they're all sort of related somehow, but these groups are in this order and in this formation because this is the best way to re-establish the function that needs to be established.